Took 54 years, but tonight Pecos police get a break in a cold case. They now know the name of a woman who mysteriously drowned at a hotel pool in 1966.
Jolaine is our Jane Doe. It's 100% sibling match that our Jane Doe is your Jolaine.
Jane.
Our purpose of coming here is I want to give her name back.
When I found out, I was really
When my
happy.
mom passed, she said that she seen Jolaine and that she knew she was in heaven and that she was going to be with her.
Imagine this. You are 17 years old. You grew up on a farm in Kansas, one of 15 children, a quiet girl, shy, the kind of girl who would rather sit in the corner with a book than talk to a room full of people. You were so afraid of water that when your family went to the lake, you wouldn't even go in. You would sit on the edge, feet dangling, watching everyone else swim. You never learned. Now imagine that same girl, your girl, is found face down at the bottom of a motel swimming pool, 800 miles from home, under a fake name, with an abrasion on her forehead the size of a quarter, with burn scars on her body, with 2 words written in ballpoint pen on the sole of her foot that nobody could explain. And the man who checked into that motel with her, gone, vanished, like he was never there. Now imagine that nobody, not the police, not the FBI, not a single person in the entire country, could figure out who she was. For 54 years. She was buried in a Texas cemetery, under a headstone that said 4 words. Unknown girl, drowned, 1966. That's it. No name, no family, no answers. Just a girl at the bottom of a pool and a man who drove away and was never seen again. This is the story of Jolaine Hemmy, and what happened to her in Pecos, Texas on July 5th, 1966 is one of the most disturbing cold cases this country has ever produced. Welcome to Mysterious Crime Chronicles. This is exactly the kind of case we exist for. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We read every single one. If you are new here, hit like and subscribe. That is what keeps us digging into cases like this one. Now, let's go back to 1966. To understand what happened at the Roper's Motel, you first have to understand who Jolaine Hemmy was. Because she was not a mystery. She was not a ghost. She was a real girl, with a real family, a real laugh, and real fears. And the people who loved her spent 55 years, not knowing what happened to her. Jolaine Hemmy was born on August 11, 1948, in Salina, Kansas. The 9th of 15 children born to Richard and Elverda Hemmy, a large, close-knit family who worked 160 acres of farmland in central Kansas. Life on that farm was hard and full at the same time. They grew wheat, raised chickens, pigs, turkeys, and cattle. Between the livestock and a large vegetable garden, the family fed themselves. They didn't have much money, but they had each other. Jolaine's sister Joyce, who was just 14 months older, described their childhood like this: going to the movies, listening to records, driving around downtown Salina on weekends. Small joys. Simple joys. The kind that stick with you for the rest of your life. Jolaine was described by every family member the same way: quiet, shy, almost painfully so. When company came over, she would disappear with a book. She didn't talk much. She kept to herself. She was also scared of chickens, even though her job on the farm every morning was collecting the eggs. Her siblings laughed about that for years. But there was something else Jolaine was scared of. Something that would later become the single most important detail in this entire case. Jolaine Hemmy was terrified of water. At Canopolis Lake, where the family sometimes picnicked on weekends, most of the kids would swim,
Be careful over
Jolaine
there,
would
sweetie.
sit at the edge,
The water
feet
is
in,
great.
nothing more. She had never learned to swim. She never wanted to. She was always scared. Always on the side. Always watching. Remember that. Hold on to it. Because in a few minutes, when I tell you where Jolaine's body was found, that detail is going to change everything you think you know about what happened on July 5th, 1966. In the summer of 1966, 17-year-old Jolaine Hemmy made a decision that teenagers make every day. She graduated high school, packed her things, and moved to Kansas City to live with two of her older sisters, Joyce and Carolyn. She was ready to start her life. She got jobs at two different fast food restaurants. She was saving money. She was building something. But sometime that summer, at one of those jobs, she met a man. Nobody in the family remembers his name with certainty. He was older. Maybe late 20s. A decade older than Jolaine at least. He presented himself as someone who wasn't her steady boyfriend. Just someone she was seeing. But Joyce met him a few times, and she took an instant dislike to him. He wasn't nice to her, Joyce said later. He was controlling. I told her she ought to find somebody else. Jolaine's response has stayed in Joyce's memory ever since. She said, "That's probably because I don't do exactly what he wants." Read that sentence again. A 17-year-old girl telling her older sister that the reason a man wasn't treating her well was because she wasn't obedient enough. That is not a girl in a healthy relationship. That is a girl who had already been conditioned to accept behavior she shouldn't have accepted. Joyce knew it. She said it directly. But Jolaine stayed. On Friday, July 1st, 1966, Jolaine stopped by Joyce's house after work. She invited her to come see a movie that night. With her boyfriend, and another girl. Joyce had plans. She said no. That was the last time Joyce ever saw her sister alive. That night, Jolaine never came home to either sister's house. Joyce and Carolyn did everything they could. They put up signs. They went to her workplace. They were told Jolaine had been scheduled to pick up her paycheck, but she never came to get it. They went to the police, and this is where the first failure happens, the first of many that would haunt this case for decades. The police were dismissive. They told the sisters that the couple had probably just run off together and would come back on their own. They didn't look for her. They didn't treat it as an emergency. She never came back. If you have been watching this far, this case is going to get heavier before it gets lighter. Stay with me. And if nobody has asked you today, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments right now. I want to know. I read every single one, and hit that like button if Jolaine's story deserves to be heard. 4 days after Jolaine vanished, something arrived in the mail at Joyce's house. A postcard. Postmarked Las Vegas. Dated July 3rd, 1966. The message was short. It said, "Well, I got lost. See you in a couple of weeks, baby." It was signed Joe. Now, here is why that postcard is one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in this entire case. First, Joyce said she never believed it was Jolaine's writing. Her mother never believed it either. Jolaine went by Jolaine. Always. She would never have signed something Joe. Second, investigators believed the 3 in the date might actually be an 8 that had worn away over time. If that is true, if that postcard was postmarked July 8th, it was sent 3 days after Jolaine was already dead. Think about what that means. Someone, a man, drove from Pecos, Texas, all the way to Las Vegas and mailed a postcard designed to make Jolaine's family think she was still alive. Still traveling. Still fine. While she was already in the ground. That postcard was not a love note. That postcard was a delay tactic. It was written by someone who knew exactly what had happened and needed her family to stop looking. And if his name was Joe, think about something else. On the sole of Jolaine's foot, written in ballpoint pen, were 2 words. Jolene. The family pronounced Jolaine's name as Jolane, not Jolaine. Investigators believe the man's name may have been Joe, and those 2 words on her foot, Joe and Lean, may have been a combination of their names. Something couples do. Something intimate. Something that said, these 2 people knew each other. This wasn't random. Whoever wrote those words on the bottom of her foot knew her name, knew how she pronounced it, knew her, and then he disappeared. Pecos, Texas is a small, hardscrabble town in far west Texas, close to the New Mexico border. Very remote. In 1966, it had a population of about 16,000 people. It was oil country. Rodeo country. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone's business. The Ropers Motel sat on Highway 80 just outside of town, a single-story motor court with a pool. The clientele was mostly oil field workers and long-haul truckers passing through. On the afternoon of July 5, 1966, a couple checked into the Ropers Motel. They signed the registration card as Mr. and Mrs. Russell Betuyn. A 15-year-old employee named Sandy Moore spotted them by the pool a short time later. He was drinking a beer. She was sipping a soda. The girl looked around 20. The man looked about 10 years older, slim, with a blonde crew cut. Sandy noticed them, thought nothing of it. About 3 hours later, Sandy was working in the front office when a maid rushed in. Something was wrong. Sandy ran to the pool, and what she saw stopped her cold. There was a body at the bottom of the deep end. Face down. Nobody else was around. Sandy dove in. She tried twice to pull the body up. She couldn't do it alone. A couple of motel guests jumped in to help. Together, they pulled the young woman's body out of the pool. She wasn't breathing. When police arrived, she was unresponsive. And they noticed something immediately. There was an abrasion on her forehead, about the size of a quarter. Red. Raised. Nobody could say for certain when it happened, whether it occurred as she was being pulled from the pool, or whether she had been struck in the head before she went in the water. They also found Polaroid photos taken at the scene and later at the funeral home. Those photos showed something else on her body. Burn scars. On her knee. On her ribs. At the time, 1966 investigators had no idea what those scars meant or who they belonged to. We will come back to those scars, because they become one of the most important pieces of evidence 55 years later. When police went to find the man she had checked in with, they knocked on the door. He opened it. He looked like he had just woken up from a nap. He was brought to the front desk and told his wife had been taken to the hospital. And this is where he made a move that tells you everything you need to know about what kind of man he was. He asked for his registration card back. He told the desk clerk he needed it to identify himself to the police. They handed it over. He followed the ambulance away from the hotel. He never arrived at the hospital. He left behind one blouse, one bra, and one pair of shorts in the motel room. Everything else, every piece of identification, every belonging, every trace of Jolaine, he took with him. The sheriff issued a bolo alert, but without the registration card, they didn't know the make or model of his car. A witness thought they saw Kansas license plates on a dark-colored sedan. Nothing was confirmed. A search for the name Russell Betuyn turned up exactly one result: an active-duty soldier at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Investigators concluded the man had been using an assumed name. Here is the detail that burns. In 1966, a vehicle with Kansas license plates was actually stopped by law enforcement during the search. There were people in the vehicle, but officers didn't feel it was pertinent at the time. They let it go. They let him go. Back at the motel, the young woman's body was taken to a medical examiner in Odessa, Texas. The autopsy was completed. No finding of homicide. The death was ruled accidental drowning. The local sheriff told the media that the only thing this man had done wrong was check out of the motel without paying his bill. And just like that, the most important search of this case was over before it began. They weren't looking for a murderer. They were looking for a man who skipped a tab. Are you still with me? If you have made it this far, drop a comment that says "still here." I want to know how many of you are riding this out with Jolaine. This story deserves witnesses. Hit like if you agree. What happened next says everything about the people of Pecos, Texas. The funeral home kept the young woman's body for several weeks, hoping someone would come forward to identify her. Newspaper stories about the mysterious drowning were syndicated in papers across the country. Letters started arriving at the funeral home from families all over America. Mothers, fathers, siblings, asking if this could be their missing daughter. Between 1,500 and 2,000 people came to the funeral home in those weeks to view her body, hoping, dreading, needing to know. One couple drove from Odessa, Texas. They were so certain this was their daughter that they viewed the body with absolute conviction, until the dental records failed to match. But they were so moved by this unknown girl that they established something called the Drowned Girl Trust Fund to make sure she had a proper burial. The people of Pecos donated flowers, donated money. A local dress shop provided a blue polka dot dress. The funeral home donated a handsome wooden casket. About 50 people attended her funeral. Strangers. Every single one of them. A Catholic priest and a Baptist minister both officiated, because nobody knew what religion she was. She was buried at Fairview Cemetery in Pecos, across the street from the high school. Her headstone read, "Unknown Girl. Drowned. July 5th, 1966. For years afterward, Sandy Moore, the 15-year-old who had tried to pull her body from the pool, would come back to Pecos and lay flowers on her grave. Every single time. She never forgot her. The town never forgot her. They started calling her Pecos Jane Doe, then just Pecos Jane, and that is how this girl, this Kansas farm girl who was afraid of water, was known for the next 5 decades. In 2014, a man named Todd Matthews, an employee of NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, received a strange email. It came from a Hotmail account registered in the Netherlands. The sender identified themselves only as the initials JCJ. No full name. No explanation. Just a message directing Matthews to a 1966 drowning in Pecos, Texas. And then nothing. Matthews entered the information into the NamUs database. No hits. No one had reported a missing person fitting her description. Either the family didn't know about the database, or they had stopped looking. He couldn't tell which. But Matthews did something that would change everything. He theorized that she may have been a juvenile when she died, and that opened a door. He connected the case to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. In June 2019, NCME-MEX Senior Forensic Case Manager Ashley Rodriguez called the newly appointed Pecos Police Chief, a woman named Lisa Tarango. Tarango had never heard of the case, but her response was immediate. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, "but I would love to do the research to see what we could do to help." She handed the case to Corporal Felix Salcedo. Salcedo started where any investigator starts. The original police file, held by the Reeves County Sheriff's Department. It was gone. Lost in a fire or a flood at some point in the past 50 years. Nobody knew which. 5 decades of records. evaporated. They went to the local museum. A woman there recognized the case and found newspaper articles from 1966. Those articles listed the names of the officers involved. The trail led to the Pecos funeral home. And there, working in the same building he had worked in since 1966, was a man named Pablo Carrasco. When Tarango and Salcedo walked in and mentioned what they were looking for, Carrasco said 3 words. "I know about that." He walked out to the garage. He came back carrying a folder labeled simply, "Unknown Drowned Girl." Inside the folder was a copy of the death certificate, letters from families across the country, small dollar donations for her burial, and tucked between the pages, Polaroid photographs. The first photos ever taken of her body, faded, degraded, but still there. The photos showed the abrasion on her face, and they showed the burn scars. The body was exhumed on August 27, 2019. Skeletal remains were sent to the University of North Texas for DNA testing. COVID-19 brought the lab work to a near halt, but eventually, a DNA profile was built, with hundreds of thousands of markers. It was uploaded to genealogical databases. The genealogy work led investigators to a Kansas family, a family with 15 children. In late 2020, a cold case investigator knocked on the door of a 74-year-old woman named Jolaine Hemmy, living in a trailer in St. Petersburg, Florida. He asked if she had a missing sister. She said her sister had been missing for 55 years. He took a mouth swab. 2.5 weeks later, Chief Tarango got the report back. 100% sibling match. Pecos Jane was Joyce's sister. Her name was Jolaine Hemmy. And those burned scars on her body? When the family heard about them, they knew immediately. As a little girl, Jolaine had been playing with Christmas wrapping paper. She balled it up and threw it in the fireplace. The fire surged back out, and it caught her pajamas. She had burned scars on her knee and her ribs for the rest of her life. Those scars were in the Polaroid photos. Those scars matched exactly. She had been right there in those photographs the whole time. Known. Visible. Waiting. In January 2021, Chief Tarango and Corporal Salcedo drove to Kansas. They sat with the Hemmy family in a living room, and Tarango said, "Our Jane Doe is your Jolaine. Our purpose of coming here is, I want to give her her name back." Jolaine's mother, Alberta, had passed away in the year 2000. She talked about Jolaine on her deathbed. Her daughter said she told them she had seen Jolaine, and that Jolaine was in heaven, and she was going to be with her. Alberta never heard the answer, but she knew. Mothers always know.
When my mom passed, she said that she seen Jolaine, and that she knew she was in heaven and that she was going to be with her.
Jolaine's remains were sent from Pecos, Texas to Kansas. Her family gave her a new burial, a new headstone, this one with her real name. She was buried next to her mother and father. If this story moved you, if Jolaine's 55 years as an unknown girl hit you in a way you weren't expecting, share this video. Because the only reason we remember the forgotten is because someone refused to let them stay forgotten. Here is where this case stands today. The identity question is solved. Jolaine Hemmy has her name back. She is home. But the man with the blonde crew cut who checked into the Roper's Motel as Russell Betuyn, never identified. The man who followed the ambulance and vanished, never found. The man whose name might have been Joe, the same name written on the sole of Jolaine's foot, still out there. Or in the ground. We don't know. The death is still officially listed as accidental drowning. No homicide investigation was ever opened. But consider everything we now know. A girl who was terrified of water, who had never learned to swim, who would only sit at the edge and put her feet in. found face down at the bottom of a motel pool, with an abrasion on her forehead that nobody could explain, with a man who vanished before she was even pronounced dead, who took the registration card, who sent a postcard to her family, possibly after she was already dead, telling them she was fine. Jolaine's sister Joyce has never changed her position. I think that guy killed her, because Jolaine was always scared of water. She never wanted to go swimming. I think he hit her over the head, and that was why she had a bruise. I don't think it was from falling in the water. Chief Tarango said it herself. Maybe this was an accidental drowning, but maybe it wasn't. We are a little bit shattered because we feel like we're not going to be able to provide the ending on this. There is still someone out there who knows who this man was. Someone in Kansas. Someone who knew a man named Joe, who drove a dark-colored sedan in the summer of 1966 and came home without the girl he left with. If that is you, or if you know someone who fits that description, the Pecos Police Department is still taking information on this case. Because Jolaine Hemmy deserved better than a headstone that said unknown girl. If you made it to the end of this video, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Jolaine Hemmy was buried without her name for 54 years. The least we can do is say it out loud. Share this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what really happened at that pool. Was it an accident? Or did that man take her there, knowing exactly what he was going to do? Tell me what you think below. Hit like, hit subscribe, because cases like Jolaine's don't get solved because the police suddenly remember. They get solved because someone, somewhere, refuses to let it go.